Mr. Speaker, this weekend we saw a referendum in Crimea that took place in the shadow of a Russian military intervention in Ukraine. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that the referendum was illegal, illegitimate and in direct violation of the terms of the Ukrainian constitution? Does he also share my deep concern following the news that a Ukrainian serviceman was shot and killed at a military base in Crimea yesterday?
Well, the right honourable gentleman is absolutely correct that the referendum in the Crimea is illegitimate and illegal. It was spatchcocked together in 10 days and held at the point of a Russian Kalashnikov. This cannot be accepted or legitimised by the international community. I think we should be absolutely clear about what has happened here. This is the annexation, effectively, of one country's territory by another country, and we must be absolutely clear about our interests, which is to see a rules-based international system where countries obey the rules. And if we turn away from this crisis and don't act, we will pay a very high price in the longer term. So we should be clear that this referendum is illegitimate. We must be clear that consequences must follow, and we should work with our European partners and with the United States for a strong, consistent and robust response.
And the song starts in the silence, and the winding of the bows above. She listens
As we discussed previously in the House, the European Union set out some very clear triggers. We said that if the Russians did not take part in a contact group with the Ukrainian government to take forward discussions, then asset freezes and travel bans should follow. Those have been put in place at the Foreign Affairs Council on Monday, and I believe further action on that front should be taken at the European Council of Ministers, which I'll take part in on Thursday. I also think we should be responding to the fact of this annexation. That we said that if there is further action to destabilise the Ukraine, and this annexation is that action, further consequences need to follow. We need to set that out on Thursday in concert with our European partners, and at the same time, I think we need to put down a very clear warning that if there was further destabilisation, for instance going into the eastern Ukraine in any way, then we would move to a position of the sorts of economic sanctions that we discussed in the House last week.
From this side of the House, we will have our support for the toughest possible diplomatic and economic measures against the Russian Federation, given the totally illegitimate actions that they have taken. I also welcome the announcement yesterday that the G7 allies will gather next week in The Hague. Mr. Speaker, given Russia's actions, it seems inconceivable that they can remain in the G8. So does the Prime Minister now agree that this meeting of the G8 should go further and explicitly decide to suspend Russia from the group of G8 advanced economies?
Well, I was one of the first people to say that I thought it was unthinkable for the G8 to go ahead as planned. We were one of the first countries to suspend all preparations for that G8, and I strongly support the G7 meeting of countries that will take place on Monday. I think it's important we move together with our allies and partners, and I think we should be discussing whether or not to expel Russia permanently from the G8 if further steps are taken. That's the meeting we'll have on Monday, and I think that's the right way to proceed.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum. Oh, shit.
Questions to the Prime Minister. Naomi Long.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I've been asked to reply on behalf of my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, who is visiting Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the whole House will wish to join me in paying tribute to Sapper Adam Morley from 32 Engineer Regiment, who tragically died in Camp Bastion on the 5th of March. He'll be greatly missed by his family and friends, and our deepest sympathies are with them at this time. Mr. Speaker, on a happier note, I'm sure the whole House would also like to join me in paying tribute to our first Team GB Winter Paralympic gold medal winner, Kelly Gallagher, and her teammate Jade Etherington, who's also won silver and bronze medals at the Sochi Games. And I, of course, wish to send the best of luck to the other Team GB competitors. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others in addition to my duties in this House. I shall have further such meetings later today.
Naomi Long.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and if I could too add my sympathies and thoughts and prayers to the family of Sapper Morelli and my congratulations.
Conservative backbenchers wish to hear from one of their coalition colleagues, Tessa Munch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Department of Health accepts that radiotherapy is the cheapest and most effective way of treating cancer. Despite this, the department will spend over £1.5 billion on cancer drugs this year. But
you broke my heart.
At the last general election, the Deputy Prime Minister said that local people should have more control over their health services. Can he explain to the House
Some days
and
I
the
just
why
don't know.
last night he voted against that?
I'm supposed to
Actually, we voted for measures which would ensure that there is local consultation.
And when I see
Well, I have to say, I'm intrigued by her line of inquiry, given their
Trouble
record with the
and
NHS. We don't need to look any further than what's happening in Wales, where they haven't met their target since 2009. It was that party opposite when in government that entered into a succession of sweetheart deals,
made me
covert privatisation of large parts of our NHS. I really don't think, after the Francis report and all the other revelations of what happened in the NHS under Labour, they've got much to stand on.
Even prepared
They'll
to
say that
justify
it
what he
gets
voted on
better.
last night, because the truth is that the Health Secretary broke
past
the law which
love
gave local people a say, so decided to change the law. And the Lib
But
Dems
when I
could
think
have
of
stepped in
you,
and stopped it. But oh no, here's what they did instead.
Trouble
First they
ain't
said they were
far
against the change, then they put down an amendment, then they sold out to the Tories.
Private sector under housing benefit, they're not allowed to have extra bedrooms. They've never been. So they are only paid in the private sector.
I wanna tell you.
But the point of social housing is to help them. But yes, exactly. But that's exactly what we do.
What
All the
I
same
am
people
feeling.
who work on marginal income, who don't receive a housing benefit, those who are in
But
the
the
private rental sector, they know very
words
well
will
that
come
you
out
occupy a house that you contribute to. Because look, the taxpayer is paying about £900 per household.
You left me crying. There's no denying. Turn my sunshine to the darkest nights. Someday I'll find somebody new. Then you will know exactly what you put me through. Until that day, trouble ain't far behind. Until that day, trouble ain't far behind.
Mr. Balls, can I shake your hand? Mr. Balls, can I shake your hand? Hey, I'm Alex Jones. I kind of led the demonstrations.
No. Very good to see you.
Why can't you guys talk about Bilderberg?
The rules of these things are all decided by people been there for a long time.
I mean, it is a corporate world government.
I'm going to
sit down if that's all right. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Cheryl Smale. It's the 19th of March, Budget Day 2014, and I'm on College Green outside Parliament. I'm here with a community press group to report on the failures of our politicians to recognise the significance of the Bradbury Pound. The Bradbury Pound was issued around the time of World War I and was printed by the government of the day as credit. What happens today is that our politicians go cap in hand to the private banks who loan the government money with an element of debt already attached, which means that the national debt can never be repaid. We're now going to hear from Brian Gerrish of the UK column and Justin Walker, the campaign director of the British Constitution Group.
Right, well, Justin, it's obviously a very special day today. This is about very special. This is about the Bradbury Pound. Tell us, particularly for newcomers to this subject, what is the Bradbury Pound about?
Right, well, let me just explain how I became involved. Because if somebody had said to me 3 years ago that I would be here on Parliament Green, College Green, talking about money supply, I would have laughed at them. Right. But I got this phone call from somebody who knew my uncle, who's the director of the Bank of England. He was on his deathbed, he got his son to ring me, and his son said very simply, look up the word Bradbury and you will have the solution to all the economic woes of this country. Right. I didn't know what he was talking about, because a few days later I came down to see you guys. We started then to look at what the Bradbury was. And the Bradbury is, 100 years ago, this place, 100 years ago, passed a bill through Parliament to make it an act for the Treasury, not the Bank of England, but Treasury, to issue its own debt-free and interest-free money based on the wealth and credit of the nation, as opposed to going to the private banks who create money completely out of thin air, just numbers on a computer screen, and once they've transferred that nothingness across to the Treasury, then we taxpayers have to find £50 billion a year to pay back the interest on something that never existed in the first place, and the capital sum.
I think there are three things that stand out today. First, we've got to make sure we get Russia and Ukraine talking to each other. Second, we've got to demonstrate here in the European Union that we will help the Ukrainian people in their hour of need. And third, and just as vital, we need to send a very clear message to the Russian government that what has happened is unacceptable and should have consequences, and were further action to be taken, that would be even more unacceptable and would require even more consequences. All of those three things matter. Those are the things we'll be discussing here today, and I'm hopeful of a positive outcome.
Appreciates how the alliance between our countries is a foundation, not only for the security and prosperity of our two nations.
We will not give up on this mission, because Afghanistan must never again be a safe Afghanistan. And the focus right now is, as I said, on trying to achieve this bloodied, broken, brutal regime butchering people nightly on the television screens. So the way we should try to help bring that about, by getting you to a cricket match and explaining the rules to you and some of the terminology that you'll have to try and get straight. The irony is that the West is simply appalling and shouldn't be allowed to stand in our world.
I concur with everything David said. The only thing I would add